Welcome back to The Content Bite. We're a podcast aiming to help writers of all kinds create a thriving business and a career that they love. Let me introduce myself. I'm Rachel Smith, a freelance journalist, a copywriter and a content producer. I'm also the founder of the jobs board Rachel's List, and I'm here today with my co-host, as I always am, Lynn Testoni. Hello, Lynn.
Hi, Rachel. Nice to see you again. As Rachel said, my name is Lynn Testoni, and I'm also a content creator, a writer, journalist, and whoever's paying my bill that week. But today's episode is about something I've never done, which is about making the move from media or journalism to government work. We've got a special guest today, Nigel Bartlett.
Hey.
Hi there. Hi.
Hi, Nigel.
Because I think the last year has brought so much uncertainty, particularly into media. And Rachel and I have both known a few of our former colleagues who've moved to government work, either in comms or in writing. And we thought it was a really good topic to tackle this week. It's guaranteed work, job security. I mean, what's not to love? But there could be a bit of a cultural change. So we thought Nigel would be able to share his experience. He's made that sort of move. So
it's
shall I
lovely
give
to be here as well. It's really nice it's actually something I feel quite passionate about actually these days, which is surprising. But yeah, no, it's good to be here.
Oh, that's fantastic.
We're very glad to have you.
Nigel's been chief sub-editor of Woman's Day, New Idea, NW and OK magazines. He was also deputy editor of Inside Out and GQ Australia. He's been a freelancer, and as a writer, he's contributed to Men's Health, Body and Soul, Belle, Vogue Living, and many other titles. He was also a freelance sub-editor for quite a few years. His digital work includes being a content producer for Michelle Bridges, Nine's Home to Love, and on the website for the Big Brother TV show. Oh, so many stories there, Nigel.
Oh my goodness, I remember all that.
But in 2016, he made the leap into government work. Since held contracts with the Commonwealth bodies, including the Digital Transformation Agency, Austrade and the Department of Human Services, and with various New South Wales government departments. He's currently a content designer. You can explain what that is, Nigel, with Service New South Wales, a role he's held since May last year. But of course, he's also the author of King of the Road, a novel, which I know that Rachel's read, but I haven't. So obviously got to get on my reading list. And it was a finalist in the 2015 Ned Kelly Awards.
Wow. Oh, it's so funny, looking at someone's bio who you've known for so many years. You are just so accomplished.
Well, it's funny actually because I listen to that and I think, oh my God, I have done quite a bit, and I think, oh, partly that makes you think, God, I'm really old, but also I think you can do all those things at the time and not really notice that you're doing them. It's only afterwards when you look back and list them all and you think, oh yeah, I've got quite wide experience, really.
Yeah, it's actually really nice to look back over your bio when you've been in this business for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
You can have a little back pat. But I have to say, I absolutely loved your book. So I'm just going to stick that in there. If you haven't read King of the Road, go and read it. It's quite a heavy read, but it's really, really great. So
thanks, Rachel. Thank you.
Yes. Why don't you start by explaining your actual role, content designer? Because that's not something that we hear about every day, is it?
No, that's right. And it can sound like a strange role, and that title can sound a little bit wanky for, if I'm allowed to use words like that on the podcast.
Yes.
We welcome it.
So the role of content designer, like there's content writer, there's content producer, there's, content editor, content officer I've seen as well. Content designer is meant to, in theory, encompass the idea that the role isn't just about words. It's not just about writing long pieces of content, long articles or long how-tos. It's about designing a product, designing, for example, an application form, or a service, how the service works from start to finish. My role does come down to words, but I work closely with developers and interaction designers and other people. We all work together as a team to produce the whole service. So some people will often see me as the person who comes in and just does the words, but I would tend to see myself as involved in everything, we need to think about how people come to this page first and what they need to do beforehand, rather than just, oh, here's a box, can you put the words in it that we need to explain this thing.
So it's a very UX based role then?
Yeah, that's right. So
Okay.
content design would be to do with user experience design and making either a website application or a phone application as easy to use for the person on the other side. It's all about human-centered design, making it as easy as possible for you to get something done.
Wow.
You go on the Qantas website, you want to book a ticket that does have words on it, but in an ideal world, you won't notice the words, you'll just get it done.
And they sort of should be instinctively designed so you go from throughout the process, the sales or purchase process or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
To make it sort of as seamless as possible.
Exactly.
This is really interesting because UX is such a big sort of emerging area, isn't it, for so many people in our industry. We did a big blog post on this actually with Laura Luck. I don't know if you've come across her, Nigel, but she did a great post on So You Want to Be a UX Writer. And funnily enough, I'm just remembering that Nigel wrote our very first post in that series, and it was So You Think You Can Sub.
Right, that's right. Yeah, I did, didn't I?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. You come for that whole gamut from subbing all the way into UX.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
But having said that, that's what I do in government. I've also done those other roles of content writer, where it's been a long page of information that is posted on a government website that is pretty much like reading an article that you or I as freelance writers might write. I haven't done comms roles, but at the moment this is what I'm doing, content design. I'm helping to build digital services that people can use easily. Yeah.
And I understand you've done a lot of contracts in your role with government, but now this is a permanent role. Is there a big difference in the public service between a contract role and a permanent role?
Sure. So I'm almost permanent. I'm not exactly permanent. In government, I've got what's called a 1-year non-ongoing role, which is basically a 12-month role. I would consider myself semi-permanent. I'm treated like a permanent member of staff. I get holiday pay, sick pay, superannuation, all that sort of thing. At the end of the 12 months, my understanding is there's a strong likelihood it would roll over, but because of the way government is funded, they never quite know what's going to happen after June 30th, so they have to wait until they know their funding. Some people definitely are in permanent roles, but a lot of us are on these 12-month roles. So it can be quite hard to understand for people outside. Prior to that, I was definitely a contractor, which is where I'd be recruited through a recruitment firm. It would be for 3 months or 6 months. I do daily timesheets in the same way a casual sub-editor would fill in a timesheet. You only get paid for the hours you do or for the days you do. You don't get any holiday pay. You do get super, but you don't get any sick pay. So previously I was working very much as a contractor, 3-month contracts, 6-month contracts, going from one to another.
Because I wonder with government, sometimes there's all these protocols, but really, like my daughter worked in government and she was on a temporary contract, but the temporary contract was 3 years. So there's all these sort of weird sort of ways that what is actually on paper in practice sometimes is a bit different. And
I think the permanent people here would call me a temporary, would say I'm on a temporary contract.
Yes.
Yeah, there are different levels of how long you're somewhere for. And it could be hard to understand and hard to get your head around. But definitely I would say that this idea of a job for life in government is not really current anymore. I don't think that happens anymore. It may do at certain levels, but not that I've seen. And my view is, and I'm not really party to how this works, but my view is that it's because of the funding thing, that funding priorities change, governments change. They can't be sure that something that they want to do now will be the same in 3 years' time or next year. That's my understanding, and I wouldn't want to talk for government on that, but that's how I see it anyway. So.
Coming in as a contractor, is that a good way to get experience in government? I've heard that that's the ideal way to join government. You do a contract and then that gives you runs on the board, you understand the culture, and then you move into a role similar to what you're doing. Would that be similar?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't intend to come into government with the aim of getting a long-term permanent role. As it turns out, I'm now in a 1-year role, which hopefully will be rolled over. I'd be very happy for it to roll over because I love my job at the moment. I could see myself being here for, as long as they want me. I started doing this because I was a freelancer. I'd kept having dinner with this friend of mine who'd started doing this sort of work, and she said, she was saying how much she enjoyed it and the money was good. And when one contract finished, recruiters would often just get in touch with her and say, oh, we've got this other role coming up. And I thought, oh, God, that sounds really good. Like,
no more hustling.
Well, exactly. I was very much of that freelance mindset where I didn't want to be in a permanent long-term role. It didn't suit my mindset at that time. Anyway, what happened was I did get approached for this first contract, and I was like, you sure you want me? I actually did say that to them. I said, are you sure? And they said, no, we want more private sector people. So I applied for it, and it was a big learning curve, but I was very surprised. I discovered that I actually really enjoyed it. And the benefits of doing a shortish term contract, which in that one was 6 months for me, was I really did learn I learned very quickly. And also I definitely had that feeling of, if this doesn't work out, I'm not going to have to leave the job, because the 6-month contract will just come to an end and I can just say, thank you, bye-bye. I've tried that.
Yes.
I don't need to do it again. But as it turned out, I did decide I wanted to carry on in it. But definitely, for me, it was a steep learning curve, and it's a very good way to dip your toes in and find out if you like it.
So talk us through that learning curve. What was hard about that for you, or challenging?
So my first contract was with the Digital Transformation Agency, which was set up to almost transform the way government as a whole.
This was the federal government?
That's right, yeah. Provides digital services, trying to sort of, if you like, and this is purely my words, and it's not what their words would be, but trying to bring government services into 21st century.
Yeah.
And suddenly I had to learn. I was recruited as a as a content designer, and suddenly I had to learn this whole new language around digital, around the way we worked in Agile, which some people will know what Agile is. It's actually a method of working. I suddenly had to learn all these different sort of levels of, this is my boss, but then above her there's the secretary of the agency, or chief executive of the agency. They report to the government department. They report to this bit and that bit, and it was like this never-ending, like,
hierarchy,
family tree of going up and up and up and up. Yeah, I'm summarizing it very quickly here, but I just found in my first few weeks, I was learning new skills. I was learning new digital skills. I was learning new ways of working. I was learning, I'd been in magazines for years pretty much, and it was just a whole new environment that I just really had to sort of, I hit the ground running, and I can remember just feeling really overwhelmed those first few weeks. But
I was just going to say that, because I think as freelancers or on magazines, you get to know your little niche and what you can do, and you're so used to doing that. Even as freelancers, you'll only take on projects generally that you can do. So you might not ever really push yourself. So I imagine jumping into a role like that would have been quite stressful if it was the first time, doing all of those things, but also feeling this pressure of, I have to prove myself because I'm getting paid in this role, and I've got to, I've got to do my thing.
Yeah, and it was scary. And but do you know what? The biggest fear I had before going into it was, I thought I was going to be really bored. I thought I'd actually been working at OK Magazine just prior to that. I'd sort of stopped freelancing for a while. I'd taken on a full-time role, which I loved. There was such a nice team. We had our weekly deadlines. It was quite a lot of pressure. And I remember saying to people, I'm just really worried I'm going to be so bored in government. I just couldn't. And actually, it wasn't like that at all. We had 2 weekly sprints, which is an agile term. Basically, we had 2 fortnightly deadlines. I do remember feeling overwhelmed and outside my comfort zone, but not so far outside that I'd snapped. Do you know what I mean? You can go.
So it was quite exciting. Did you?
It was exciting.
It was an exciting challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I can't stand being bored. And so I was suddenly like, oh, I'm not bored. This is really nice.
It sounds like the agency came to you and said, we're going to put you into this role. You'd be a good fit for this role.
Yeah.
And perhaps knowing that you didn't have a lot of the UX skills or you didn't have the agile experience that the team might have had.
Yeah, and also the person who hired me had made it clear that they were deliberately hiring people from outside of government for these roles. And so it was a bit like, okay, I don't have to suddenly become a government person, whatever that might be, whatever mythology there is around there. I didn't have to fit myself into being a government person. So that took a lot of pressure off. I just had to learn to adapt my skills, learn new skills, and find my path in it, I guess, really.
Mm-hmm.
We do hear a lot about government bureaucracy. Do you think that's accurate, or do you have a bit of freedom within your role? What sort of hierarchy do you have to go through? I know maybe you can talk about trying to get permission to do this podcast.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So what I will answer from my personal experience is that I haven't had that experience of whole big levels of hierarchy putting pressure on, where I've had to check with someone, they need to check with someone else, they need to check with someone else, they need to check with someone else, higher and higher. That hasn't affected me in my day-to-day life. In the same way that if you're working on, and I'm going to keep using magazines as the reference because that's where my bulk of my career was. In a magazine, quite often on the ground, you're not having to deal with everyone up. It's the editor or the publisher, and
Yep.
So it's very much like that. I can get on with my job, and it's I can be creative and do whatever I need to do my collaboration, and it's fine, and let everyone else worry about that. But as you're right that to be on the podcast, I did have to check with my boss. Is it okay for me to be on this podcast? She said, fine with me, but send an email to the media department, sent an email to not just from my organization, but from the department above my organization, and they had to okay it. And actually they were fine. They said, yes, so long as you don't claim to be talking for Service New South Wales, so long as you don't talk directly about the work you're doing every day, it's fine. So do you know what I mean? It's almost a bit sort of common sense, really. That, and I think if I was working for the Commonwealth Bank, I'd probably want to do the same, or any bank, Qantas.
Or
If I was working for Qantas,
any big corporate.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I have to remember I'm no longer just freelance Nigel, who's my own boss,
Is that a hard cultural change, or did you ease into it?
I had one contract with a state government department, and it was very governmenty. It was I didn't quite pick this up at the interview. Well, I don't think you can know at the interview, but I went along and I knew very quickly that it was very governmenty, and I was sitting in a cubicle with someone who didn't talk to me at all. I come in the morning, come in on a Monday and say, hi, how was your weekend? Good, thanks. And that would be the only words I would get out of that personal day. And I was bored. I had no deadlines. They'd said, here's a big chunk of work. Can you do it, please? And they didn't really tell me when it needed to be done by. And that was the big sort of like, oh my God. Oh my God, I wish I was just like writing this story for that person and that, setting up this story, trying to find some subbing work, oh wow, someone's just approached me about some work, and oh, I wish I had all that zinginess you get of freelancing. So that was when I did feel like, oh no, this isn't quite right for me. But then I did a bit of coaching. I recruited I had a careers coach, and she said, Nigel, you're in this contract, it's only for like 4 months. That is a freelance lifestyle if you want to see it like that. It's like your contract will finish. You can go back to writing for magazines and websites if you want. You can then get another contract later if you want. And I was like, oh God, hadn't thought about it like that. I'd thought, oh God, here I am stuck in this role. I'm going to be here till I'm 70.
There's an end in sight.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I guess you probably learnt things about some good red flags for another government role. Good questions to ask, maybe in an interview, or do you understand the governmentese or the government language now when you can work if it's a better fit?
Yeah. I love that question. What questions should you ask in a government in an interview, make sure that it's the right fit for you and the right culture?
Yeah. So for me, when I was as a contractor, I'd get approached by recruiters, or I had my own recruitment agency who would put me forward for roles. And I learned quite quickly that if I went into the offices for the interview, I would have a very good look around the office.
Great tip.
I would sort of try and gauge whether it looked like people were all in cubicles with strip lighting. I would look at what they're wearing. People here can't see me, but today I'm wearing a t-shirt and jeans and I am in the office. But other roles I've had to wear a shirt and tie and that sort of thing. And that doesn't really bother me, but I'd try and pick up that sense. I went for one interview And the women that interviewed me were so lovely, and there were these two women, and we had a laugh in the interview, and I thought, I came out of there thinking I could work with these women really happily, but the subject matter was like, something so specialized, and I would have had to write content for some really scientific subcategory of some big body. I thought, I can't do that. I'd last a week in this job. I think as freelancers, we like a lot of variety, and that can be quite a big shift, that you might be working on one project for a while. So choosing the project.
I can imagine that some of these projects that they do seem to be, the contract roles are project led, really, aren't they? So you scope something out, work on it, implement it. But does that mean you're sort of stuck in the same thing for a long time, which could be hard? I don't know if I'd do that.
Yeah, it's such a hard question to answer, because sometimes you will be hired for a particular project and that's what you're doing, and it might be for 3 months or it might be for 6 months. Other places, and they will usually tell you this at the interview, they'll say, this is the project we're working on, but it might pivot. That was the first time I heard the word pivot, way before COVID. Pivoting is quite common in these projects, because you'll start off down one path, and then for some reason, whatever reason, it's got nothing to do with you or nothing to do with the team, someone somewhere will decide that project is no longer going to happen. So the whole team will be suddenly diverged off onto another project. And actually, I find that quite exciting, because it's like, oh, all that work we did, a bit of a shame, but now we're doing this exciting. Sometimes it can feel like, oh my God, we've just sort of taken this pile of paper clips, which are all in a mess at one end of the desk, moved them over to the other side of the desk in a slightly better way. And now we're just like, oh, we're not doing paper clips, we're now doing staplers. Sometimes it feels a bit like that. But there's usually a very good reason why it's happened.
It sounds to me like the contracts that you're doing, or the job that you're doing currently, and perhaps the contracts before that, are very much teamwork. So you have to be in the office. And I know at Rachel's List, everyone wants remote. I mean, how much flexibility is there in these contracts for you to work from home if you want to, even some of the time? Or
Yeah, sure. That's actually a very good question to ask at an interview, coming back to your question previously. I definitely think there's been a huge cultural shift. Even before COVID, there's been a huge cultural shift whereby people would very often, it'd be largely office-based, a lot of the work. And then sometimes people would just say, I'm working from home tomorrow. They'd just tell the team, oh, by the way, working from home tomorrow, something's on, or I just, you don't even have to give a reason half the time. I'm working from home tomorrow. That is a big cultural shift. And also a lot of the time, people will negotiate. Again, this is pre-COVID. People would often negotiate, I want to do 2 days a week from home, 3 days a week in the office. Sometimes people would even say, I really want to be home-based. Will that work for you? And if it doesn't work for you, then they'll tell you in the interview process. My recruiters often would say, wait till they offer you the job, the role, and then negotiate all that. Then you can say, because one of my things was I wanted to work 4 days a week quite a lot of the time, and I would say to the recruiter, oh, do you think they'd be open to 4 days a week? They say, well, wait till you get offered the role, then ask them. And so then I would say, oh, I'd love the role, but I'm really hoping for 4 days a week. And sometimes they'd say, yeah, we can work with that. And as for the working from home these days, currently where we're at the moment, everything's changed, so working from home, as I said to you, I'm in the office, but like most of the time there's only about 5 of us on the whole floor, and a lot of us are working from home. And at some point that might change, but I know that there has been, COVID's brought a huge cultural shift that
not just government, but everywhere.
Yeah.
So, but it is interesting.
I was just going to say, can you talk us through a bit more about, going for these roles, how you would find them, how you would be considered? I know a lot of our listeners would be really interested in that process, and also, you going in without the UX experience. I mean, should you just take a punt on it if you have all the other skills, that sort of thing? How would you go about getting something like those roles?
So I was very fortunate in that this person happened to find me on LinkedIn after years of me saying, I don't know what the point of LinkedIn is. And, I never get any jobs through LinkedIn. But I did know enough to sort of keep my skills updated and that sort of thing on LinkedIn. And they found me on the basis of the work I'd done for Michelle Bridges' 12-week body transformation and things like the Big Brother website. And then, the general magazine background. Definitely keep your LinkedIn up to date. Look at your transferable skills. A lot of what we do here, especially if you end up in a comms team role, a lot of it is pure journalism. Writing, researching, stakeholder management. If you've been in any kind of editorial editor, deputy editor role, play those things up. You've had to negotiate with people. You've had to sort of talk about deadlines. You've had to, massage advertisers, all this sort of thing. Definitely play up all those transferable skills. Any digital experience that you have, I was going to say play it up, but I don't think it's even necessarily a case of playing it up. You're not trying to over egg it or anything. You just want to make sure it's prominent in your skills on LinkedIn. And then I would also contact recruitment agencies. They all have digital teams. A lot of them have government teams. I would stick to the bigger ones because I had my fingers burnt really badly by a small, very dodgy recruitment firm that I obviously can't name. Whereas the bigger companies like Hayes or Randstad, or I think McLeod might be Chandler McLeod might be one of the big ones. Hayes has been the one that I've been very happy with, and I don't mind plugging them because I have been happy with them.
And some of the government, I know with the New South Wales government, they have preferred recruitment companies as well. So that's sometimes worth investigating, whatever state you have, if they've got government approved companies. Is that it?
I believe so. I'm not altogether sure how that works, but what I found with a company like Hayes is that they're very transparent with the employer, with the government employer. They're transparent about what my rate is, what cut they're getting, percentage they're getting. Whereas with some of the smaller ones, they could be just saying, here's a lump sum figure, and I might be getting 20% of that, and they might be getting,
Oh, yes.
and it can make me look like, what happened before with me was that it made me look like I was charging a massive amount. And in fact, it was all with them.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Anyway, that's a slight side issue.
It's an interesting warning. It's a good warning. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You kind of learn to listen out for the sort of, this sounds slightly good to be true type language or that sort of thing.
But government work is often quite well paid too. I mean, we were talking before we started recording, because years ago, government, you sort of traded money for security. But now you're saying also there's not the same security, but it is quite good money compared to obviously media, particularly as the salaries have dropped.
On that security issue, just I wouldn't say it's not secure, but I wouldn't say it's that sort of old idea that people have of
job for life.
Job for life, yeah. I think it's as secure as any job. I think pretty much. I don't think any full-time permanent job is fully secure. I don't think freelancing is totally insecure. I think they could be anyway. That's the side issue. On the money side, with the contract, you see some that I sort of look at and I think they're paying really low rate, sort of like almost sort of sub-editing. That sounds terrible. I think, I'll say as a side issue, I think freelance sub-editors are totally underpaid and need to be paid more. That's my side.
I think we'll all agree there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. and we need more jobs in that area. But anyway, you see some hourly rates that are the same as a sub-editor, and you look at what person's being asked to do and you think that's not fair, But then equally, you see you either get paid an hourly rate or you get paid a daily rate. And sometimes you'll see a daily rate and you'll think, whew, gosh, I could work 2 days a week on that, and that would cover all my bills on that. But then for that money, you would probably be expecting someone with a lot of skills, a lot of responsibility, a lot more pressure. I think also a lot of the time they've been recruiting from private sector for a lot of the digital roles and that sort of thing. So obviously they need to compete with private sector. I'm happy with what I earn. I don't feel, I'm not at the top end, I'm not at the bottom end. I feel very comfortable where I am. I feel like I have a nice balance of security as far as life can be secure, and income and holiday pay and that sort of thing. So
one nice thing about the public service is that all those things are really transparent, isn't it? Compared to sort of often with media jobs or private sector jobs where it's sort of got a vague range and you never know. Here they say this is a job that pays X dollars and it's always really clear, so you know what you're going for. Would that be
that would certainly be, now that I'm sort of this semi-permanent type person. Like I've got a friend who's worked in government for years, and he said to me the other week, he said, "Oh, what grade are you?" And I had forgotten what grade I'm on, and then I told him what I thought I was, and I immediately knew that when I told him my grade, he would absolutely know my salary.
Yes.
But it didn't really bother me. But I think with the contracting, it's more like being a freelancer where you're sort of negotiating. Sometimes the contract will say it's this much per day, and we're not, and you can't negotiate. Other times it will be the recruiter will sort of tell you what they think you can go for, and you might be sitting next to another contractor who might be earning something completely different from you, and you wouldn't know.
Interesting.
So it's not necessarily transparent.
I just want to ask you about skills. I know you've probably picked up loads of skills. Have you done any training in UX, or is that sort of been self-taught on the job type?
Yeah, for me, it's been self-taught, actually. I'm the sort of person that when I go off and do a course, I don't really learn it until I'm actually putting it into practice. So pretty much everything I've learned, like using a content management system, and I've ended up using quite a few now over the years. I've always learned it on the job. And that was pretty much the same with, when I learned InDesign on magazines. I went back to England for 6 months. Had been using Quark Express before I went back doing.
I loved Quark.
I came back and suddenly Australia had turned to InDesign, and I was like, oh God. And I did some freelance work on Bell magazine, I think it was. And someone said, oh, well, this is what you do. And on the first day, and I was like, oh, okay. And I spent that 2 weeks at Bell pretty much getting up to speed on InDesign. So, and I'm a bit like that. That's what I'm personally.
Yeah.
I learn on the go, I learn on the job. And it can mean that you go through a bit of a sticky phase where, especially now at my age, I'm 56, and sometimes I'll be like learning, on some new program or whatever that, I've never learned before, and you're sort of having to say to people, oh, where's the button to do this? I can feel like an old man. I have to remind myself, actually, I'm not, that anyone picking this up would have that problem. But my view is that if you're the sort of person who hates technology, likes to write everything down in pen and paper, or, really struggles with their iPhone, or can't find anything on the Woolworths website, then digital work is definitely not going to be for you. But if you pretty much know that when you go onto any website, you can usually find your way around. It might take you a little time to find a certain button, or you might need to say to someone, oh, where do I do this? Then I think a lot of us have much better skills than we think we're capable.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And the more CMS systems you use, the more you realize that they're all quite similar. You just have to work out how you do something on this system. And then, yes, I've worked the first couple I found hard. And then after that, you just adapt, don't you?
And also, we don't have to know everything. I think from the outside, we can think, oh my God, I've got to go off and do this. I certainly used to think that I've got to do all these courses. I don't know anything. And then actually we learn what we need to learn. And then it's like having a computer. I don't use half the things on my MacBook. Other people do. And the things I use in my daily life for digital, it's pretty minimal. Everyone else can do all the other stuff if they want to. I don't need to, Someone else can do all that.
There's a coder or somebody doing all that.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
So Nigel, is there anything unexpected that you've learned since taking on a government role? One
of the things that was surprising for me, but actually turned out really good, was that I discovered quite quickly that even as a contractor, I have to abide by public service rules. And so that means that on social media, I have to be really careful about posting anything overtly political. And while my job isn't political, I'm employed by taxpayers. And so, prior to working in government, I was very ranty, very argumentative on Facebook. And so suddenly I started during election period, and I stopped all that. And it was such a relief. It was like, I don't have to get into these arguments on Facebook anymore or Twitter.
You had a good out.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, that's, for me personally, I really found it beneficial. I know a lot of people would hate that, but we do have to remember that at the moment I'm employed by the New South Wales government. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to be saying, I can't believe this is happening, or I really love that this is happening. Either way, it just isn't, I'm supposed to be neutral. So
were you actually told to sort of were you told that, or
I discovered it on the radio actually. The first day I started, they said something about now that there's an election happening, public servants are being reminded that they're in caretaker period and they have to be extra careful about their posts. So I discovered it by chance, and then somewhere there's a public service code, and I think it was part of the sort of onboarding process. You have certain things you have to watch and listen to, and some people just ignore it actually and don't get penalized for it. But I feel quite strongly that it's something that I want to abide by. I sort of quite like that aspect of, no, I'm paid by the taxpayer, and taxpayers are all different. They all have different political views, and therefore, who am I to start?
That's not your role.
No, it's not my role. Yeah.
Interesting. I just wanted to ask Nigel if he has any parting words of wisdom for, journos or subs who might be thinking of moving into government.
Sure. I would definitely say give it a go if you think it might be of interest for you. And if it's not of interest when you get in there, get out. That sounds really blasé, especially for someone like me who does worry about things a lot. There's no harm in trying. And also, especially sometimes, when we're backed into a corner career-wise, finances-wise, or whatever, we can find a new path that might not be what we originally thought we wanted to do, but then it can open up all these doors for us. So I would definitely say it's worth trying out. Once you get into government, there's so many different avenues you could take that align with your interests. And, if you're doing a contract that isn't quite right for you, just bear in mind that it's, 3 months' time, you'll be out of it. And you can also finish it earlier if you want to, the same with any
job, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're not stuck there for life.
Oh, thanks so much, Nigel, for sharing your government journey with us. It's been really interesting.
Yeah. Really interesting. Yeah, thank you.
And I might not do this forever. Who knows? I'm really enjoying it at the moment. Who knows what might happen down the track. We'll see.
Yep, exactly.
Fantastic.
Great.
Well, thank you. I think that brings us to the end of the show. So thank you so much, Nigel, for giving us your time. I really learned a lot and I found it really interesting. So thank you to everyone who's listening. We've been picking out quite a few new listeners in the last few weeks, haven't we, Rachel?
We have.
Keep up the good work. It's such a
We'll try.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So we love hearing reviews. So if you have time to give us a review, that'd be fantastic. And tell us what you like about the show and any guests you'd like us to include. And leave a rating for us. And we'll be back next week.
We will. Thanks so much for listening, everybody.
Nigel. Bye.